At the end of last week, President Trump took some disastrous steps on the issue of the economy. NBC News explains here. Trump signed an executive order Friday scaling back the sweeping 2010 Dodd-Frank financial regulatory framework enacted under his predecessor as a direct response to the financial crisis. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer labeled the Dodd-Frank Act a disastrous policy. They're targeting a broad range of financial reforms, ranging from bank rules about speculating with customer funds and wind-down provisions for too-big-to-fail institutions to consumer protections from predatory debt collection practices and forced arbitration. Okay, so this is Donald Trump going back completely on that campaign promise that he made to drain the swamp and crack down on Wall Street and look out for the little guy and the average Joe and regular people. He's doing the exact opposite here. In fact, in a press conference he had about this, he said something like, "Look, we got to do it. We got to get rid of these regulations because my friends just can't borrow money. They can't borrow money." What? So your rich ass friends, banker friends, people who work in other industries, they can't get a loan, presumably for some sort of rational reason, because maybe they suck at business like you do, Don, or something else. And so now you're like, let's just loosen it up to be able to give them loans. Let's do that. Right, because that never went bad before. Oh, correct. It was a subprime mortgage crisis that we just had in 2008. So the banks would give out loans, and they would do it to make short-term profit at the expense of the long-term viability of the economy. And then, whoops, when people couldn't pay it back, everything crashed. So Donald's solution is, why don't they lend out to more people who probably can't pay it back? That would be tremendous. Believe me. Okay, this is really, really sad. So, again, they laid out some specifics here as to exactly what they're going to go after in Dodd-Frank. Now, understand, as I've explained about Dodd-Frank before, Dodd-Frank is a giant mixed bag piece of legislation because it is massively weak and it didn't go far enough. So what we should have done is brought back Glass-Steagall among a bunch of other things. We didn't bring back Glass-Steagall. We got Dodd-Frank, which is a bill that's riddled with loopholes that largely allowed Wall Street to go back to what they were doing before the crash either way. But ever since it's been implemented, there are some good things in there. I need everybody to understand that. But ever since it's been implemented, what's happened is the Republicans have been using this sly trick where they'll take like an agriculture bill, for example, and they'll slip in a provision to it that says, oh, and by the way, we're getting rid of this part of Dodd-Frank now. And then it'll go through. So it's been on a step-by-step basis. It's already had a hatchet taken to its face, Dodd-Frank has. And now Donald Trump is just, putting the nail in the coffin here by saying, well, I'm going to target specifically the remaining, provisions in the bill that are actually make sense and are still good. So they explained it, and I'll mention it for you guys one more time here. Bank rules about speculating. So under Dodd-Frank, there are rules about just how much you could speculate because rampant speculation is not a good thing. We have... Oh, and in fact, that's with customer funds. So there's a part of Dodd-Frank that's a little Glass-Steagall-esque. Remember, Glass-Steagall says commercial banking and investment banking. There needs to be a wall of separation between commercial banking and investment banking. So when you go to the bank and you put your money in there, there's a certain level of security attached to that where you think, well, they're not going to do crazy casino capitalist bets where they're going to lose all my money. That used to be the case. But then when they repealed Glass-Steagall, now the bank can bet that money however they want, no matter how risky. So Glass-Steagall's still gone, but there were Glass-Steagall-esque provisions in Dodd-Frank, and now they're saying, well, let's get rid of those. They say provisions that are there to have steps in place to wind down the banks. Because remember, they were too big to fail, so they were bailed out. But under Dodd-Frank, they say, okay, look, if something like this happens again, we need to have a plan. We need to know, okay, you can untangle and wind down, big bank X by doing such steps, by following these steps, by going through this procedure. So the banks were mandated to come up with a way to wind down if something like this were to happen again. Trump is coming in and saying, no, don't worry about that. If you're too big to fail, whatever, that's fine. You're too big to fail again, and we're not going to have any protections in place for if something like this were to happen again. And consumer protections from predatory debt collectors. So that's the payday lenders, the predatory payday lenders. The Republicans are 100% on the team of the predatory payday lenders. And you have the corporate Democrats are on their side too. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has taken a lot of money from these people and has, stonewalled regulations that would crack down on them. So what's Donald Trump doing? Giving them a smooth hand job behind the dumpster. He's saying, well, let's get rid of, the rules against predatory debt collectors and the rules against the payday lenders. And also, let's change the rules on arbitration. So for arbitration, what that is, that's basically like a court process within a company. So if you do something wrong within the company, they say, oh, don't worry, we're going to handle this and we'll do it within the company. No need to actually have a court case and file criminal charges. Government, back off. We got this internally. And then they do a little slappy-dappy on the wrist. There's somebody who, through greed and recklessness and fraud, bankrupted their companies. Instead of actually having legal penalties against them, it's just you go through arbitration and we'll say, hey, you need a week time out or something. Tisk, tisk. So this is Donald Trump saying in every imaginable way, let's kowtow to the banks. Let's let the big banks do whatever they want to do. Let's let them run roughshod. Let's have no regulation. And understand, man, we were already in a position where we reinflated the housing bubble and there was going to be a crash. With Donald Trump in there, all he did was put us on the fast track to having another collapse. And by the way, I don't even know, the collapse can come in a variety of different ways. So it could be the same route that the housing boom again, because prices are right back to where they were before the Great Recession, and it's fake. It's not real. So it's not like people all of a sudden, oh, look at that, the middle class started making way more money. So now, this is the reflection of the real price of the houses. No. So that bubble can burst again, and we'll be right back to square one. And it'll be even worse this time if we were to have another subprime mortgage crisis. It could be in the form of the student debt crisis. We have over $1 trillion in student debt, and student debt is treated in a special way where you can't file bankruptcy on it. So there are people who are senior citizens still paying back student loan debt. It could be from credit card debt. It can be from the derivatives market. There's 1,000,001 ways in which our economy is unstable, and it's a house of cards, and it's going to collapse at some point. So I don't know if it's going to be this avenue or any of 13 other avenues, but it's coming. Anybody can see we're in a bubble. You don't have the stock market get chopped in half in 2008, which is what happened. I mean, it probably peaked at the bottom in 2009 or so, but you had this utter collapse. And half the wealth was just wiped out. And then all of a sudden, look at that. However many years later, here we are in 2017, and all of a sudden everything's hunky-dory and the market's at record highs. It is fake growth. And now you have an administration in place that's not just basically keeping a Band-Aid over the gangrenous wound, a Band-Aid with a little bit of ointment. What they're doing is they're taking a knife that has E. coli all over it and shoving it right back in that wound. Man, I come up with some gross analogies. And this is no laughing matter, so I shouldn't be laughing about this. But you have deregulation nation under Donald Trump. That's what we're looking at right now. And all the talk about drain the swamp, and I'm going to look out for the little guy, and we're going to get tough on Wall Street. And Hillary's, there's Goldman Sachs. She's a candidate of Goldman Sachs. Oh, look at that. I appointed Goldman Sachs Steve Mnuchin to Treasury Secretary. So it was all talk. He's not a real populist. He's not fighting for the people. As Bernie Sanders said, and we're going to get into that story later, he's a fraud. His actions show that he's a fraud. So if you're still defending this guy like he's some sort of crusader for the working class, you've been had. You've been took. You've been bamboozled. So understand that he's coming for what remains of Dodd-Frank, and that is nothing but a giant heist for his buddies on Wall Street. Because remember, this is a fact that's not brought up enough. So Wall Street, the big banks, they owned Hillary Clinton through campaign contributions and contributions to the Clinton Foundation. How do the big banks and how does Wall Street own Donald Trump? Personal debt, which might even be worse. He has over $1 billion in debt. You think he's not going to listen and make deals with the people who hold that debt to wipe his slate clean? Of course he is. Of course he is. He's going to let them do whatever the fuck they want. So this guy is extra beholden to the establishment. He's not fighting the establishment. He is the establishment, or at the very least, he's their bitch boy.